The first thing I see is the cover shot, and it's a tray of Goldie's barbecue. Everybody knew because it had the homemade bread on it. And I scroll down into the list, and there's Goldie's #1, and then #2 is InterStellar BBQ. And I looked at my wife and said, "We're #2." And she was like, "Oh, we're in so much trouble."
I'm on a journey to become the best cook I can be. And on this journey, I get to learn from the best of the best. From 4th generation Texas pitmasters to backyard barbecue heroes who've risen to become the top of their craft, all the way to a Kentucky coal miner who started with nothing, made his own smoker with his bare hands, and carved out his own place in the annals of barbecue history. Today, you and I are gonna learn from the team behind the restaurant that Texas Monthly named the top barbecue joint in Austin, Texas. The team's so good, they're among the first class of recipients of Michelin stars for Texas pitmasters anywhere. Today, we're gonna learn from InterStellar BBQ.
Al.
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Welcome to Texas.
Thank you, man.
You want to come in and have some barbecue with us?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Our story is that whole tray. If you come into InterStellar and you just get a piece of brisket and some white bread and some barbecue sauce, you're not going to ever understand us. To understand my food, you need to try everything all together. It's the larger sum of a bunch of small parts, like a band. You got to have it all to really get the finished product.
All right, where do we start?
Let's start with the brisket. You know, try a piece of the fatty brisket.
Gotta get right in there, man. You can't be shy.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Wait,
Gotta try the lean as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Both into the brisket.
All right, here we go. That's really moist. Like, that's what most people's point feels like
Yeah.
in your mouth.
I mean, that's what we're shooting for. We want the lean side to eat just as good as the fatty side. And if it does, we've nailed it through all the myriad of steps, you know, the trimming and the seasoning and the cooking and the resting and the tallowing and then the slicing and choosing the right piece. All of those little components come together to make that happen. All right,
what do we
let's
taste
try
like?
some lamb next. This is the lamb shoulder. Again, it should be well seasoned. It shouldn't be salty. It should be bright. You should taste the lamb. It shouldn't be vinegary, but it should have like some pop and some lift on it.
Like everybody that does lamb is like heavy rosemary, sage. That's not, this is a Texas taste with the lamb. The lamb
We lean
really
into
shines
the
through.
flavor of the lamb and we lean into the flavor of the smoke.
All right, what's next?
The Pfalzer bratwurst.
Okay.
With our sausages, we're looking for a nice snap. They should be juicy.
Definitely a nice snap. You know, interestingly, I taste the smoke on this, which I'm not used to tasting on a bratwurst, but it's not overwhelming. Like it's subtle.
Not
in a
everything has to
great
be in
way.
your face.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a little more chill. The beef kielbasa. This is a mainstay on the menu. It's been on the menu pretty much since day one. Juicy, rich.
It is, and
It's
again,
a mild
kielbasa, I'm not used to having off of a smoker, but that flavor, it really adds to the experience here.
Yeah. Frito pie sausage. This is our wildest sausage, but this is our chance to try it all.
Frito pie sausage?
Yeah. Yeah. We love experimenting with flavors too, and this is definitely one of the more wild, wacky sausages that we do. My good buddy Bill Dumas, the sausage sensei, he would approve of this sausage. So the one where we have the most fun, I think. We've run some other variations of sausages like this too, but it's like the cheese should still be there. A lot of times if you cut into a link of sausage and there's big holes where the cheese used to be, it means it's been hit with too much heat. It hasn't been cooked properly.
It tastes like Frito pie.
It tastes like Frito pie.
Do I have to share that beef rib with...
Unfortunately, you do for the tasting tray. You're welcome to order another one on your own.
You gotta connect with your food, you know?
That chimichurri?
It wakes it up, doesn't it?
It does. So this is not a dinosaur rib. It's not that overwhelming, but the chimichurri just really does brighten the whole thing up.
So we've tried all the meats, we've gone through all the different savory versions. Probably the only dish that we really serve that has a sweet element to it is the pork belly. It kind of stands alone on its own out there with that one. And it's probably our most important dish as far as like a signature item.
It looks like a pork belly burnt-end, but that's not what this is.
It doesn't eat like a pork belly burger.
This, I've got firm and soft and so many flavors.
Yeah. And there's a reason why we call it peach tea glazed pork belly. That is a very intentional wording. We don't want to represent it like it's a traditional burn-in. And people often call it a burn-in because they look at it and say, oh, that's a burn-in. But for us, it's actually a very different dish.
Yeah, this is not a burn-in.
Yeah.
This is the best bite of pork belly I've ever had. And you're gonna teach me how to make this.
Yeah, we're gonna teach you how to make this. We're gonna show you the beef rib, the brisket, the whole works. If I hear you right, I think you want to be a pitmaster. So you want to go learn how to do it?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go learn.
All right, man. You said you wanted to be a pitmaster, so here's where you start. You start in the dish pit.
Okay.
This is good. You're gonna be the master of this pit.
All right, I'm the pitmaster. Any trick to washing dishes at InterStellar, or am I just gonna
Just
get into the soapy water and go?
so grab that wash scrubby, the green one or the rag, yeah.
All right.
Pick it up, and then you just gotta hit every square inch of that pan, top, bottom, and sides.
So the problem is my girlfriend is gonna see this and she's
Yeah,
gonna
no.
know
There's
that I know how to do this.
There's nothing sexier for a woman than a man who washes dishes. I consider myself a part of the dishwashing alumni. I think if you have not washed dishes and you run a restaurant, you have missed a key point in your training. And I make sure that all of our cooks, all of our servers, all of our staff spend some time in the dish area. I mean, heck, when we closed down the sandwich shop and opened up InterStellar, we did not have a dishwasher for the first 2.5 years. I made sure that when people came in and interviewed a job, they knew that part of their job was going to be to clean up their own dishes at the end of the day. So we ran without a dishwasher. And that actually created a lot of respect and care and concern for the dish area, where it normally is treated very poorly.
So was food always gonna be a part of your life? Did you know as a kid you were gonna be a chef?
Barbecue first entered my life as a child growing up in Texas. You know, we would have family events, and one of the most important questions when you were planning these family events was, is dinner gonna be barbecue or Tex-Mex? Some of my most precious memories growing up was with my father. We would go hunting every fall, hunt, deer. We would fish every spring and summer. In the late summer, early fall, we would hunt dove and quail. So we were very much an outdoors kind of family. Most of the time, those meals were prepared by my dad, his friends, and I just always loved that part of the day. More often than not, it was barbecue in my family and households. So that was kind of the beginning of my love of barbecue as a Texan. So I guess that was kind of the beginning of my potential career as a cook and a restaurateur. But I didn't really get serious about it until I got much older. Kind of fell into cooking accidentally. A family friend of mine asked me if I wanted to have a summer job, come up to the restaurant and he'd get me some work so I could make some money. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I want to make some money. I was like 17, I think. And when I got there, he introduced me to the dish pit. He said, you're going to be washing dishes. This is going to be your job. And that was the start of my career in the restaurant business.
Okay, so you started at the top,
Yeah.
washing dishes as the executive dishwasher.
I still wash dishes. Spent my time in there for about 3 months, and I got promoted to busboy. That was my next big step into the restaurant career, was into bussing tables. Eventually, I was the salad boy, setting up the salad buffet. Eventually landed on the line cooking there, and by the time I left Gallagher's, I was running and manning the wood-fired pit, cooking all the steaks. Brisket being the most important thing in Texas barbecue, it's important that you have a high quality brisket when you start.
Right.
It really helps if you can cook a good piece of meat. So we use Heart brand for our briskets.
Okay.
They have a breed of cattle that's a Japanese breed called Akaashi.
Oh,
and
okay.
we're real lucky to have this brisket because I think it's got great depth of flavor, lots of umami. The first thing I do when I am trimming briskets is kind of flatten it out, take a look, see if there are any odd pieces hanging off, any random pieces that got missed in the butchering process over the factory, get a feel for how much fat we're gonna have to take off this guy. And our goal with the briskets is to make them fairly uniform, trim off the heavy fat, get it a little bit thinner, so we can render that out when we actually cook the briskets. When I have it flipped over on this side too, I always usually go ahead and trim off this section, which there tends to be some tendon and some tough product in there that's really not any good for anything.
Right.
So we typically don't use that. And then you've got this discolored section here as well. That's from the butchering process. We want to discard that. So you quickly see we're discarding a whole lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff gone.
Yeah. If there's any extra fat on the bottom here that looks like it won't render during the cooking process, I'll go ahead and trim that off too.
Right.
This is a nice looking brisket. You've got great marbling here in this whole lean section. The lean section runs this way.
Right.
So when we cut into it, we kind of just slightly angle it and come towards that once it's cooked. And then the fatty section actually runs this way. Flip it over to the top side, I always give it a feel, see what kind of fat we're looking with. I can just feel by touch that it's pretty thin on the lean side. You can see it's pretty thin on the lean side. It's really important to cut away from yourself. That way you don't cut yourself.
So you learned knife skills in culinary school.
Yes.
So as you're bringing new folks into the kitchen here that come from barbecue heritage rather than a culinary background, do you find yourself having to teach knife skills again?
Yeah, we're always teaching knife skills. Heck, we focus on knife skills all the time because honestly, it's one of those things, if you're not working on it, it just kind of disappears. Right. You'll notice that I took the nose off this brisket, but this section always cooks out real lean.
Right.
And doesn't eat really well. Now, this is great for sausage.
Right.
But it's not so great for brisket.
So this is that piece that when we get the brisket is kind of behind the point or attached to the point.
Yeah, it's usually
that
up
we need to get that off.
It's usually up towards the front.
Right.
You know, and it's also prone to overcook real quickly too, because it has less fat. This is the Mohawk. The guys over at Heartbrand trim it pretty good for us, so we rarely have to take much off here. It's a little section that kind of like sticks up.
Right.
And if you don't trim it off when you cook it, you'll have these briskets that have this kind of raised section in the flat. A lot of companies don't trim it very well, so you would have to knock it down. But because Heartbrand does such a good job trimming it, we rarely have to knock that down.
Nice.
What I do like to do is get in here and get some of this fat out. It's just not going to eat very well. And then this is when I start working on this side and trying to get the shape where I want it.
Well, we are going really deep into that.
Oh yeah. We take large sections off because we want to make sure that the brisket has a real nice look to it. Now, this is a problem. It's so thin.
Right.
You can't really use that. So you also can't just lop it off into a point like a dagger. So again, this is another section where we're going to lose some product. We're going to sacrifice some of the brisket in order to get to a better
So you're going to come way
shape
up there.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So this is the shape I'm looking for. Okay, so another dish that's become a big part of our story, kind of a signature item, are our beef ribs.
Right.
We choose to use a USDA Prime all natural beef short rib from Creekstone Farms.
Okay. And I noticed these are smaller than the dinosaur ribs we often see. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a deliberate choice on our part. When I was working the board every day, cutting on the block, cutting those really big dino ribs, to me it just seemed like a very extravagant purchase.
Right.
Barbecue restaurants don't really make a ton of money on this because they're very expensive and we don't actually charge what we should for them in order to turn a profit on those beef ribs after the cooking process. So they're kind of a loss leader. And it really bummed me out. So I started thinking about the beef rib and like, well, how can I solve this problem, give the customer something that's really great, an amazing bite, but doesn't hit the wallet so hard, so they can then try some pork belly and then try some lamb and not walk out of here saying all I got was a beef rib.
Right.
So that's why I went with the short ribs. With the beef ribs, we're not going to really trim much of anything off of this. It's really about just kind of cleaning up a few small sections, a few imperfections. And then basically we're just looking off to square off a few of these edges. All right, so we have a piece of pork belly here. This is basically half of a belly that we have basically just kind of squared off to get rid of any loose edges, trying to make it as even as possible. With the belly, it's a real straightforward, process with the trimming. Just get it squared off and it's ready to go.
Right.
So, the reason I got serious about culinary and cooking was I found out that I was going to have my first child. I was pretty young. I think I was 22 at the time. Found out that I was going to have my son Ivan, who now is part of the restaurant and helps me out on a daily basis. And I looked at my wife and I was like, so we've got to get serious. I guess I need to start figuring out what it is I'm going to do with myself long term. And at that point in time, I had left waiting tables, had gone back to Gallagher's to pick up a job there, again, cooking. And when I got there, there was a couple of folks that were serious about the culinary arts. And at that point, I was like, well, I could do that. I could get serious about cooking. So I signed up for culinary school, Del Mar College. They had a culinary program there for, at this point, probably close to 60 years. And that was my kind of first steps into thinking of myself as a professional and taking the restaurant business serious. When I graduated from culinary school, my goal was to find the best restaurants as close to me as possible, pester them until I got a job, and spend anywhere from 18 to 24 months at that restaurant learning absolutely everything I could. And in my mind, I would spend a year and a half to 2 years in each one of these restaurants, learn as much as I could, and then move on to the next place, choose it for some reason, the management style, the success of the restaurant, the food of the restaurant, and go learn from them for another 18 months to 24 months and just kind of start my path in the industry, learning from people that were actually out there doing it and being successful in the business. All right, so we've trimmed a whole bunch of briskets.
Right.
And we are ready to season these briskets. So I really have bought into the belief that if you're going to buy a high quality brisket, you really should let the meat shine and not try to hide it under a bunch of flavors.
Okay.
So we keep it very simple. We use Morton's kosher salt. We use Fiesta seasoning. We get their 16 mesh black pepper.
Okay.
And we also use their granulated garlic.
Okay.
And we've chosen those particular brands and those items specifically for how they perform in our specific events.
Okay.
And it's a quick, easy seasoning process. I think the meat should be, every bit of the meat should touch seasoning. Nothing
This
should
is
be.
interesting. We're not using a shaker. We're going right into a tub here.
Yeah, right into a tub. And you see we basically create a strip all the way around.
Right.
The next thing we do is before the meat goes down, we always stir the seasoning.
Right.
Because it picks up the ingredients inconsistently. So you have to constantly mix your product. Press it in really good. Kind of massage some love and some salt and pepper in there. And then we pick it back up. Another quick hand stir. Even out the spices. Drop the brisket back in there. Now this is a really good chance to see if you maybe didn't press quite hard enough anywhere, so we'll sprinkle a little extra on.
So as much seasoning as that brisket wants, we're going to let it have.
As
We're
much seasoning that will stick to it
Right.
in one pass, basically one single coating of seasoning on the brisket. I'll throw a little extra on here, press it in, and then what I do is I'll pick it up, give it a little shake, onto the pan it goes, and this is ready to go into the smoker. Again, like all the things we do around here nowadays, in the pursuit of consistency and things being the same and speed, we just use a pre-built spice blend that we have,
Okay.
and it's the same spice blend that we use on our brisket.
Okay.
We're coming in here, we're tapping all the edges. Want to make sure we have seasoning all the way around. We go into the seasoning fat side down, because that's the presentation side.
Right.
Kind of massage it in there, flip it back over.
So a good, healthy coverage there.
Yeah. And then we pick it up, give it a shake to knock off any excess, and then this is ready to go into the smoker.
Okay.
Okay, so we're seasoning the beef ribs. It's kind of a 3-step process for us. We start with a little bit of mustard, just a French's yellow mustard, just cheap mustard. It has a bit of a binder, and we massage it and spread it around the beef rib. The idea is this will add just a tiny underlying bit of acidity to the dish. You won't really taste it.
So not a heavy coat. We're just getting a little bit of a
It's a light coat, just add a little bit of flavor. The first thing we do is add our seasoned mix. You can see it's got a little bit of parsley, there's some garlic in there, some black pepper, some salt, a couple other random ingredients. It's a little more complex on this particular rub.
Yeah.
So we do a pretty light coat on the membrane side. We do season all sides of the beef rib, because I think when you're cooking, every section should be seasoned. And I'll just kind of press it in, make sure we got everything covered, flip it down to the bone side. Again, a little more mustard. Just make sure that all sections of the beef rib has a little bit of that. We're gonna come back with our seasoned beef rib rub. And then the last thing we do on the top side is come back with just plain 16 mesh black pepper.
Okay.
And we kind of finish up the season. We want this one to be just a little bit pepper heavy. So we adjust it by adding a little bit of extra pepper to the mix.
What shows in the final product?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is ready to go in the cooler till it's time to load on the smoker tonight?
Yeah, so we'll cook this one, its time comes, but yeah, we throw it in the cooler, then the guys load it up and get it going.
All right, perfect.
So we kick off our day around 2 a.m. The boys roll in. The first thing we do is light up all the barbecue pits. The next thing that we need to do once the fires are hot, temperature has been achieved, we're ready to roll, is grab all the meats from the walk-in. So typically that starts with our beef ribs. We grab those off the tray the day before, we've seasoned them, we've trimmed them, we've got them ready for the guys to come in the morning. So all the pit masters have to do is just focus on cooking meat. So we run those beef ribs out to the pits. The briskets always go on Big Merc. That's our original pit. That's the pit that we built our name on, our brand on. It's has always been and will always be our brisket pit. So we like to line certain briskets up near the front closest to the fire. We choose specific sizes on the briskets to line the outer wall closest to the metal, which radiates heat differently. Each brisket goes into the smoker for a specific reason in a specific area, because we've learned how the meats react, and you want big briskets in certain areas and smaller briskets in other areas, so hopefully at the end of the cook they all come across the finish line relatively close to each other. They get them loaded in the morning and they start their 14-hour journey in the wee hours of the morning here at the restaurant. Next up is we got to get the pork bellies in. Those require several hours of smoking to get them nice and tender, get the right amount of bark and flavor we're looking for. So we take those seasoned pork bellies that we did the day before as well, and those typically get loaded towards the front half of the pit closest to the fire as well. That's where we like to cook the pork belly. At one point in my career, I wanted to be that high-minded fancy chef. I wanted to have like a French Laundry type restaurant with lots of tiny little plates and precious presentations and amazing ingredients flown in from all over the world, and it was going to be all about Chef John. My art on a plate. And for a long time, that was the kind of career I was pursuing. And at some point, I looked kind of at the restaurant and the dining room and the people, and although they were all perfectly nice folks and I was surrounded by perfectly nice people, none of the people that was in the dining room was anybody that I would ever hang out with in real life. So at that point, I decided to switch over into more casual cooking. My idea was that I would get into sandwiches. So that was the beginning of Noble Sandwich Company.
When the restaurant first opened, I was like right at that point where I started to really understand what was going on and like how big of a deal it was that my parents were opening up their own business, right? I had always known my dad to be a chef at other people's restaurants, working for other people, and this was his first opportunity to fill a menu in a space with his own creativity and his own passion for cooking.
And that menu, you know, God love it, was my ode to being a chef and running a sandwich shop. So we would make ingredients to make recipes with. There was nothing on the menu that was easy. Everything was made from scratch.
you know, they baked their own bread, smoked, brined, and cured their own meats, made their own mustard, you know, made everything. And I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Every sandwich was a completely unique sandwich. There were no repeat ingredients. And at some point we got popular, which was great, but also a really big problem because the restaurant was not built to be a busy, popular restaurant. I was cooking like a chef in a fine dining restaurant in a format that required speed and volume.
And you're probably not selling a lot of $50 sandwiches.
Well, that's the other thing. Here in Texas, they'll pay top dollar for a good piece of brisket. They look at a sandwich and go, come on, boy, I can go down to Subway and get a $6 sub that's a foot long, and you're asking me $11 for this little sandwich? Just, it wasn't valued here. I thought if I made beautiful food, people would come around.
So what you're talking about is the natural struggle between the chef and the restaurateur, which in your case happens to be the same person.
Yeah, it's very difficult because you get taught, you know, it's mantra, it's like the Bible. Like if you are a great chef, people are just gonna love your food. And the smart chefs try to tell you along the way that, hey, it's not about you, it's about the customer. And you can make the most amazing dish that everybody in this kitchen will tell you is phenomenal. But if it doesn't resonate with the customer, it's just gonna languish on the menu and you're gonna waste money on it.
I met John Bates when John Bates was making sandwiches. And it was kind of this cult underground thing until it became this place that everybody wanted to go to. And that's where we met. And you know, he started talking about his fascination with barbecue because I'd visit his sandwich places and all he'd want to talk about is barbecue and all I want to talk about is damn sandwiches. And lo and behold, he's talking about opening up a place. And I didn't think he was that serious because, you know, he's opening up multiple sandwich places. That seems to be a good thing. And he decided to pivot and he's like, I'm just going to go all in to barbecue.
The road to finding that I wasn't happy running the sandwich shop was a really long road. I grew up in a blue-collar home, in a blue-collar town, where if you want to make anything of yourself in Corpus Christi, you have to bust your ass. And I worked really hard on Noble. We worked on it for about 8 years to make it a successful restaurant. And we found some marginal success. We were able to grow it to a second location, which again was another problem because it was not set up for that kind of volume. And we couldn't hire the people that I wanted. And I found myself dreading going to work. The thing I loved most, cooking in restaurants and hospitality, I'd wake up at 6 in the morning and go like, dude, I don't want to go to work today. And when you find yourself in that position and you own a restaurant, or when you find yourself in that position, you own any business, and you no longer find joy in going and doing what you're trying to create, you're screwed. You're in a really bad spot because you're no longer happy doing it. And you can't run a great business if you're not happy with doing it. And that's where I found myself.
I remember John came to me one day and said, you know, I'm really getting tired of making sandwiches. You know, what do you think about the barbecue thing? And I was like, well, we better make sure we're good enough because, you know, we've all done our share of barbecue, but there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of good ones out there, you know?
I knew I didn't have any friends in barbecue. We didn't have any mentors in barbecue. And I was gonna have to figure out a way to reach out to the barbecue community. So we started having pitmaster parties here once a month and inviting people from the industry to come work with us. And they were people that we either admired or people that I kind of knew maybe, or just somebody that had some connection in barbecue that I wanted to get to know a little bit better. So that was kind of my entryway into like introducing myself to barbecue. And we did a few pop-ups during that time period. We did some barbecue pop-ups here. We said Noble Sandwich Company is gonna throw a barbecue. And I took our little barbecue pit that we used for caterings, took it on the road to a couple of restaurants and breweries and did pop-ups there, and was really just trying to find out if I enjoyed the process. So I spent a good part of 18 figuring that out. And somewhere in the fall, decided that that was the destination, that was gonna be the new road. So reached out to a family friend in Corpus Christi. He built a barbecue pit for me. It was done for Christmas. Picked it up the day after Christmas and cooked on it every day for basically 60 days. And we opened up InterStellar. With the pork belly, After it's been on the pit for approximately 8 hours, we're looking for great bark again, common theme. The other key thing that we're looking for is the ability to probe it. You can put a thermometer through it or a wooden dowel. You're looking for tenderness all the way through on the pork belly. Once we've got that color we're looking for and we know the flavor's there, once it's tender where we like it, we go ahead and pull those off. We line those up on sheet trays and let them cool down, and then we pop them into the refrigerator so they can wait for the next step.
If you want to produce the kind of high quality barbecue that InterStellar does and do it on a consistent basis, you need the right tools. And one of the most important tools in a pitmaster's arsenal is a high quality instant read thermometer. Now, I've used pretty much all of the high-end instant read thermometers, and I'll tell you a secret, you don't need to buy the most expensive one. It's actually not the best. After testing everything, I've settled on the Lightning Instant Read Thermometer by ThermoPro. I really like the fact that it's IP65 certified, which means that it's gonna keep all of the water and grease and other gunk generated by our barbecues out of the thermometer and keep it working. It gets accurate temperature readings in less than a second, so I don't have to hold my hand over a fire for very long. It's actually got a hold or a lock button, so if I need to reach way back into a smoker to get a temperature of a brisket all the way in the back, I can reach in, press the button, pull out, and see what the temperature is. The display actually changes as I move it, so I can take temperatures right-handed or left-handed. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's even got a super strong magnet, stronger than any of the other magnets on the high-end instant read thermometers, so I can stick it to my refrigerator, to my smoker, to my kitchen island, anything that's metal and steel that a magnet will stick to, this thing will stick to. But the true testament to the quality of this thing is that they put a 10-year warranty right on the box. Like, the company's gonna stand behind this. So as we're using these in the most demanding cooking environments, if it doesn't hold up, ThermoPro is gonna replace it. And that says a lot about the company and about the quality of the product. You can save 30% on the Lightning from ThermoPro with the coupon code Behind the Food. Use the link that you see on the screen right now or in the description, or if you're watching on a TV, feel free to use that QR code. And again, remember coupon code Behind the Food to save 30% off of whatever price you find on that website. Trust me on this one, you won't be disappointed.
So we got into February of 19. We were running out of money. I was on the clock because I had rent to pay and bills to pay, and although I had a staff of like 3 people, they needed paychecks. So I was all right, well, we've reached this classic moment in every startup business's life of like, if we don't open now, we may not open up. So we're gonna do this. We think we know how to cook barbecue, which we did. I mean, not nearly as good as we needed to, but we knew enough to sell it and not feel bad about it. So we opened up in February 19, and the first day, my best recollection of it was a mixture of, you know, any first restaurateur's first day of terror and joy, running to the ground, dog tired, you know, bright-eyed and hopeful that you've made the right decision. And I'm sure we did maybe 60 people that day. It felt like 600. It was amazing, exhilarating, and then I looked at the numbers and realized, well, if we're gonna actually make any money, we're gonna have to serve a lot more people, and we're gonna have to do it a little bit quicker. It was a lot of learning about yields and margins and how much brisket you threw away when you trimmed it, and what you could reuse and what disappeared in the pit when you were cooking. Figuring out how a real barbecue restaurant runs and how a real barbecue restaurant makes money, that was a learning process. A day in, day out of figuring out how to get the most out of the product that you were purchasing without overspending and being wasteful.
So this one was cooked yesterday.
Yes.
So we're coming out of the refrigerator temperature,
Yes.
and we're gonna cook it again.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically this is like a twice cooked pork belly
Okay.
for simplification. So like everything here, it's about analyzing what we have and taking a look at it and making sure that we can get the best out of this without being wasteful. We do trim off the edges on the belly. We kind of square it up.
Okay. And what happens to that trim?
The trim has the second life in our South Texas style hash.
Ah.
See what we got here, see what the best way to cut this is so we can get cubes that are relatively uniform.
I guess with the sides trimmed, it's fair, nobody gets an end piece.
Nobody really gets an end piece. Nobody can be upset that they were the one that missed the end piece.
Right.
So that's, that's what we're looking for. And the best pieces of pork belly are going to be a balance of lean and moist. You can see the striation of the fat and the lean and the fat and the lean. When it's layered like that, that's going to be your best bites.
It looks beautiful.
So works out pretty good. So we bring them out here, and then the goal is to try to get a nice even coat of glaze on the belly throughout the process. We're kind of like lacquering it, if you will, or candying it.
Right.
People have different terms for it, but the idea is the same across the board. You want a nice thin glaze to set on the belly after the cooking process.
Okay.
It's a little time consuming, but getting the first coat on helps for it to adhere and set over time.
The level of care that you're taking is very different than what most people do when they're glazing a pork belly burnt end or similarly cooked.
Yeah, the more traditional method is to put it all in a big pan and stir it around and be quick and fast about it. There's nothing wrong with that, but I also find that they get kind of beat up and they don't have the nice clean edges, and I think just for visual aesthetics, having the clean edges makes for a real pretty shot when you're plating up that food for people.
So this is one piece of pork belly. How many pieces of pork belly will you cook, or how many of these morsel bites will you cook in a day?
On our busiest days, we'll cook 80 pounds.
80 pounds.
Yeah.
And then each of those is going to be individually glazed like this.
Yes. 80 pounds translates to about 800 to 850 cubes of belly that has to be glazed.
And so 4 glazes, that's 3,500 spoonfuls.
Yeah, you're gonna do about 2,600, 3,200 touches.
That's a lot of delicate touches.
Yeah, it is. It's why it's a true labor love, but then that's why this is also a unique dish out there in the barbecue world.
Yeah.
So we open up the old pit to make life a little bit easier for yourself. We use this tray.
Right.
Set it in the pit. Get lined up, and then close her up.
Okay.
Send them off. So one of the tools in our tool chest of things that we use to cook the briskets is our spritz. We don't spritz a ton. We apply it as needed, and then the spritz is a blend of Worcestershire and apple cider vinegar.
Worcestershire?
Yeah, Worcestershire.
I haven't heard that before.
We use the Worcestershire for a couple reasons. It is a natural flavor builder. It's a natural MSG, if you will. So it has lots of umami, and then also applies just the tiniest bit of color to the brisket as well. You wouldn't really know it, but it does add up as you spritz things.
So in the first 2 years before the big inflection point, we're dealing with COVID. Is the menu evolving? Are you starting to add more of your chef creativity to that limited path you originally set down?
Yeah, for the first 2 years, the menu was very much a trial and error kind of format. I always cook from my stomach's point of view. So I cook the things that I want to eat. But I've learned the lessons in the past, and if a special doesn't hit with the customers, we just usher it off the menu and it never comes back. That time period, it was like, let's make this brisket better. How do we make it better? Let's make these ribs better because I had better ribs at so-and-so's place and our ribs aren't nearly as good, so how do we make our ribs better? And then let's start introducing in some specials because we're not busy enough. We need more people in here. We think we're making great brisket, ribs, and sausage now. So let's try to add some specials on the menu that might drive in some business. So we went through various lamb dishes. We went through pork belly. We went through oxtails. I mean, anything that I can barbecue, we've probably ran as a special and it's gone through this pit at some point in time.
Right.
And then the customers, not the reformed chef, decides what gets to stay on the menu. To make life easier, instead of coming up with a new special every day, we would come up with a special, and that would be the Wednesday special. Wednesdays only. And if it sold, we'd run it the next Wednesday, and so forth and so on. And then we'd have a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday dish. You know you have a star when the Saturday dish starts causing problems on Wednesday, because they show up on Wednesday and they're like, hey, I'm here for the pork belly. Like, well, it's a Saturday dish only. Everybody knows this. Well, I don't care. I'm upset now that you don't have the pork belly. And you quickly learn that this dish is creating demand. It started as a Saturday special, and then it became a Sunday and a Saturday special. And then it became a Friday, Saturday, Sunday special. And then I was still getting heat on Wednesdays for not having it on Wednesdays, and I was tired of getting yelled at on the phone. So I said, you know what? Pork belly's going on the menu. We can't deny the pork belly. It is demanding a place on the permanent menu.
Right.
And that's how we work nowadays. Same thing with our lamb shoulder. Again, before COVID, I tried to sell lamb. Nobody wanted it. They were like, lamb, gross. Like, I'm here for the brisket and the ribs and the sausage. Don't try to give me any of that weird hipster stuff from East Austin. I'm not into it. And after COVID, the market had changed. I don't know why. Don't really care. But the lamb that I couldn't give away in 19, people wanted in 21. And after the whole year, we had built up so much demand for the lamb that we decided that it needed a permanent spot on the menu. And I said, you know what? People want the lamb. Let's get rid of the pulled pork and we'll just do pulled lamb. And so that became the lamb spot on the menu. It just kind of like forced its way onto the menu, and something that people weren't as excited about became the thing that had to disappear, because as much as I want to grow the menu, trying to stick with that original idea of like, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, don't overcomplicate things. So now we're in a position, if a great special presents itself and it demands space on the menu, something's got to go away. Okay, so we're a little bit further in the process. This is now time to add the next layer of glaze, keep layering on those flavors. And as you'll see when we pull out the pork belly, it's already starting to change in appearance and looks, and you can see the flavor being built already.
I can't wait to see it.
So let's take a peek.
Ooh, wow.
There we go. All right, so grab this tray. Now the belly's already getting tender and jiggly. You can see it. It's like a cube of Jello jelly.
Right.
You know, it's that's when it's yummy. And again, we're just gonna apply this next layer of glaze. And what's happening at a small level that you don't quite realize yet is this glaze is starting to caramelize and the sugars are starting to cook, and the smoke is starting to stick just a little bit more to the belly as the glaze keeps getting tackier and tackier and stickier.
So are we literally layering a smoke layer and then we're putting on another glaze and there'll be another smoke layer and then another glaze as we go?
Yeah, in a sense we are.
Wow.
And we'll get more color on this too, as you'll see that it'll get darker as we're cooking the belly as well. Because those sugars are gonna start to caramelize, and then you're also gonna get more color from the smoke as well. Back in, and we'll wait another 30 minutes or so.
Okay.
Further along in the cook, closer to the midway point, we also start applying some foil shields to our briskets. That allows us to keep cooking the briskets facing in that direction, because it changes the way the heat flows when you move the briskets around. But we also don't want that end to get too much heat, too much abuse. So we, almost like a pie in an oven, when you cover the crust to keep cooking it and not turning it black, we apply heat shields to our briskets as well, so we can keep cooking it facing in that direction, but not overcook that section of the brisket. Prior to me opening up the barbecue place, I'd always wanted to be mentioned by Texas Monthly as a sandwich shop. They really never paid much attention to us, so I always kind of felt like they just don't like my food. When Daniel visited in 19, I knew he'd had a nice meal, but you could tell by the tone of the review that it was a nice meal. We'd had a follow-up visit with Daniel, so I knew that we were being considered. He gets in line, I see him, and I'm like, all right, this is our opportunity to impress him, and hopefully we'll get a mention in the Texas Monthly Top 50. That was honestly my goal. The prior one, they had two kind of lists, the top 50, and then they had a list of like up and coming places, like places to keep an eye on. And I was like, that's our opportunity. We're gonna do our best to get on that little mentioned, like, keep an eye on these guys list. That was the goal going into Texas Monthly. So we gave him all the meats that we were serving that day, gave him all the sides we were serving that day. Then he went outside and sat down with some friends and family, enjoyed the barbecue. And that was basically it. I knew he came in and said that he enjoyed the food. Of course, I didn't want to ask, because I didn't want to overstep my boundaries. But I thanked him, and that was kind of the last we heard from Daniel. We got into the summer, and then eventually Texas Monthly reached out and did a fact-finding thing and wanted to know our hours and the days we were open, those sorts of things. And I was like, oh man, maybe we're gonna get that mention we were shooting for. And then they sent out a photographer, and then it got a little more serious. I was like, well, they're sending out a photographer. Like, you think we made the list? And my wife's like, nah, we didn't make the list. It's like, yeah, you're probably right. They're probably just getting like some content. Maybe we might have a little picture somewhere on a website or somewhere. And then eventually they sent out another person to do a full-fledged interview and a little bit of video work. And at that point, I was like, I looked at my wife and said, you're wrong, we're on the list. It comes up, and the first thing I see is a picture of the cover shot, and it's a tray of Goldie's barbecue. Everybody knew because it had the homemade bread on it. When you're in barbecue long enough, you can just look at a tray of barbecue and know who made it. Like, there's just certain stylistic things. You're like, oh, wow, man, look, Goldie's is on the cover. And I scroll down into the list, and there's Goldie's #1, and then #2 is InterStellar BBQ.
I think John, and I can always tell when John's a little stressed out about something, because he'll either do this or kind of grab the back of his head, and I kind of looked over, and I walked over, and I'm like, what's wrong? And he goes, we're effed, we're screwed. And I'm like, why? And he like turns the screen towards me, and it said Goldie's BBQ #1, InterStellar #2, and I had just taken a sip, and I did a classic spit take. I was just like, I was like, what do we gotta do? And he goes, I don't know.
And I looked at my wife and said, we're #2. And she was like, oh, fuck. We're in so much trouble.
I think we all were in a group thread, and we were like, oh shit, we're gonna need to hire more people, we're gonna need to get more pits. And I do remember we all kind of had a celebratory meeting after that, and we had some whiskey and things. And we were like, well, how much food should we cook for the next day we're gonna be open? And we debated that for a while, and we were like, well, I guess we should cook the amount that we normally cook for Saturday and just see what happens. You always don't know. Like, are people really gonna show up? Do people really pay attention to this like the day after the list comes out? And needless to say, we sold out in like less than an hour, I think. And I think we were like, okay, things are gonna change from now on.
Oh wow, look at that.
So you can see we're starting to get almost a shell to the pork belly at this point. And that's that sugar cooking on there. So these pieces of pork belly have reached what I'm looking for doneness. I feel like these are ready for service now. What I'm looking for and what I think says it's done is we've got this beautiful kind of lacquered appearance to the belly at this point.
Right.
You got this beautiful shine. The outer edges now have taken all the glaze as well. What you notice in the early process, it was hard to get the glaze on everything.
Right.
As it gets closer to being done, it just kind of sucks in and holds on to the glaze. So now you've got these beautiful glazed pieces of pork belly, and then when you give it a tap, you can, like I said, you can see it's just
Right.
It's just tender.
That fat is rendered.
You can tell it's got that springiness, like it's ready to be eaten. So yeah, color and feel. And
Yes.
then we should go in there and try a piece of pork belly.
We should definitely go in there and try a piece of pork belly.
Good stuff.
Right.
Next up, the next big step, probably one of the biggest steps in the cooking process for the brisket, is determining when we're going to wrap it. We're looking for beautiful bark creation first and foremost. We're not really looking at a specific temperature range. I don't even know where the stall is. I just know that when the brisket looks the way I want it to look, and I know it's got the flavor I'm looking for, that's when we go ahead and wrap it. And that's typically pretty late in the process. We're talking probably 10 or 11 hours in. We go ahead and wrap our briskets in butcher paper. We know the beef ribs are ready by a couple key tells. We're looking for that beautiful color of bark that we're expecting to see, almost black with all that smoke and pepper. There's several little ways that you can check the beef ribs for doneness, along with using your thermometer, stick it in there. Typically, you're looking at anywhere from 198 upwards of 203, tends to be the sweet spot for the beef ribs. So once we've decided that the beef ribs are done, they're ready to go, we need to get them off the pit because they've reached their peak of perfection. We put them onto sheet trays, we run them into the restaurant, and start another resting period where they cool down. At that point, we go ahead and hit them with tallow, and then we wrap them up with a little bit of plastic wrap to keep them nice and moist and juicy as they wait for their turn on the tray. This would never happen in the restaurant world where chefs run things and it's a cutthroat competition. In barbecue, your competitors will actually call you up and say, hey, do you need some help?
And the first call we get was from John Brotherson. And it was really cool how nice the Texas barbecue the community is.
So for folks that don't know who John Brotherton is, he is a much missed, very important part of the barbecue community. John is probably the only person that I would ever call the Texas barbecue ambassador. The day the list dropped, and I know John had worked his whole career in barbecue to get on that list, and he landed on the list, so he was super excited. He was so happy for us. The first thing he said was, congratulations, I'm so happy for you, you totally deserve it. Do you need to borrow a barbecue pit? And of course I said yes, because we only had one barbecue pit and we were about to get destroyed. About a week later, he drug his green Moberg pit called Oliver, and we used it until we got our next pit to help kind of build up our firepower to cook more barbecue. But yeah, it was amazing. The last step in this whole process, and really truly the most important step in this whole process, is the finish. They're approaching doneness, and the best way that you can figure that out is just giving them an old-fashioned pick them up. You know, we feel our briskets, and we're looking for a certain kind of dead weight feel where the brisket kind of slumps around your hand. That's when we know our briskets are ready, and that's what we look for. We look for feel first and foremost. Also, typically that is in the 190s for us. The upper 190s to the mid 190s is typically where we pull our briskets. When I was a chef, I always wanted to be recognized by James Beard. When I was a young chef, I thought that was most important. And I've now learned as a more seasoned cook that the real win is the customer in the dining room, not the accolades for your ego. The most important thing that happened to InterStellar as a business and for the staff was Texas Monthly. It will probably always be the thing that set this all off. And at a certain point in my life, when I turned away from the chef world and was going to go into more casual food, more common food, I just presumed that Michelin and Beard were these kinds of things that just weren't going to be opportunities for more. And I was fine with that. What's funny is Michelin has come full circle and come to meet me on the other side of what I thought was a wall that would never happen. And my hope of hopes was to get a Bib Gourmand. The Bib Gourmand is supposed to be a designation for an excellent restaurant at an affordable price. And then you start scaling up into the stars, and each star has a different recognition and should come with a different set of expectations. What actually makes me happy about the Michelin thing is, like, you don't know who the reviewers are. They just come in. I don't know if it was one, I don't know if it was two, I don't know if it was four. I do know that they came in and they enjoyed the food so much they gave us that award. So it makes me feel really good about the competence of the staff and the team to be running at a volume that's much higher than it ever was when we got recognized by Texas Monthly and still delivered the goods without anybody knowing, which makes me super proud as a restaurateur. Because Michelin is not for the chef. Michelin is actually for the restaurant. So it's like the ultimate team award, which is what's, for me, is a really cool thing to share with the team. Okay, so here is our brisket after it's rested over the evening. When we're in the paper, taking a look at everything, making sure that we like the briskets, we also typically hit it with a little bit of tallow as well. That adds another layer of flavor, because we're all about layering flavors over time. Right. And then it also makes the briskets real pretty and juicy looking as well. So
Okay.
That's the main reasons why we take a peek at this time of the day.
Can't wait to see what it looks like.
Yeah. So you unwrap it like a Christmas present.
I am noticing how small it is, like from how we trimmed so much down and now it's lost even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is tight, it is beautiful.
It's like just a little beautiful package. And that's, and this is why the brisket costs what it costs. And
Right.
you can see, how much we lose during the cooking and trimming process. This is a pretty good looking brisket. We've got good bark coverage. It hasn't gotten washy. Washy is when the bark kind of like comes off because of too much moisture,
slides off, right.
or it wasn't trimmed correctly. But this is a pretty good looking brisket. We've got good color all the way across. It's nice and flexy. That's what we're looking for. So I deem this to be to our standards.
Worthwhile, okay.
So we hit it with a little bit of tallow, kind of juice it back up, and then don't want to linger because we don't want it to get cold.
Right.
We go ahead and wrap it back up, and to the hot box it goes.
And then back into the hot box till service. Great.
So here we are at the finished end of the road for the beef ribs. It's time for it to meet its maker, achieve its glory, be all it's meant to be. It's time to cut this guy up and serve it to one of our customers. So it's rested overnight in the plastic wrap. Okay. We do that because we like the way it controls the moisture on the beef rib. Moisture is that common thread in a lot of this too. It's like making sure we have just enough moisture so it's juicy and tender, but not so much that it becomes soggy and messy.
Right.
Flip them out, and as you can see, it's tender. You can see how it gives a little bit.
Look at that jiggle.
And then this is when we decide how we want to serve this beef rib.
Right.
Now, it's a 4-bone rib when it comes out of the smoker. When we go to service though, we go ahead and pull a bone so we can make slightly bigger beef ribs for the customer.
Okay.
So what I'll do is take a look at it and decide which one gives us or the customer the best experience. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this bone right here, and what that will allow us to do is a nice big rib on this side. We'll cut it in the middle here, and you'll end up with 3 ribs that are all basically the same size.
Okay.
And then the key thing, the money shot, and if we've done this right, hopefully this bone, you give a little bit of a twist.
Just twists and comes
and
right.
it just pulls right on
that.
it.
Look at that.
And that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
If it sticks, if it doesn't give, it hasn't been cooked long enough, and we know it's not tender enough for service. So now that we've got what we think is the perfect beef rib for the customer on the tray, the way we serve beef ribs here at InterStellar is with a chimichurri sauce. My what next in barbecue is the continued long-term goal of turning this into an institution. And I think if I am lucky enough and blessed enough to have the staying power of a Snow's, of a Mueller's, of a Kreitz, of a Black's, where it transcends generations, right now we have to lay that really strong foundation of this is who we are. This is how we do business. This is how we treat our staff. This is how we treat our community. This is what we're willing to do. And we're not going to do these other things because that doesn't work for us. And I think in this business, it's really, in the American hospitality industry, you kind of get sold a bill of goods. You're told you have to say yes to everything. You have to be open every day. You have to be open on holidays. You can't have family time. You can't have the stuff that normal people have because you have to be available all the time. It's mandatory. And that's a bunch of bullshit. The people that run hospitality businesses, restaurants in particular, they have lives too, friends and family, and we're building something that respects that and honors that, and we're gonna stick to the model. It's working, we're happy with it, and if we do anything with this restaurant, I would love to maybe eventually have our own spot where we weren't renting. I'd love to have a building that felt more like a barbecue joint and less like a shopping center, but we do a pretty good job with the pits to make up for that. But I think that would be next. What's next for us is let's keep building on the legacy, let's create a legacy, and if we have the opportunity to have a long-term home, where I get to retire, then maybe we'll find our forever home somewhere down the road.